You're about to see the Feuling and Rivera 4-valve head designed for the Harley-Davidson Evolution engine. You will see the head in production and an easy step-by-step how to install these revolutionary heads onto a Harley-Davidson motorcycle. The head itself is the brainchild of Jim Feuling, whose engineering accomplishments and world speed records are well known throughout the automotive world. He designed the Oldsmobile Quad 4 2-liter engine, which puts out over 1,200 horsepower. Jim took this vehicle to the Bonneville Salt Flats and drove it at over 280 miles per hour. That same kind of engineering has gone into the development of these heads. The technology and equipment utilized in producing these 4-valve heads is truly world-class, state-of-the-art. The managing editor of Hot Bike magazine rode one of these test bikes throughout the southwest United States. The desert heat and pace was intense, but the bike never failed to provide 100% reliability at astonishing performance levels. We're now going to take a look at Feuling Engineering's manufacturing facility. Here you'll get a look at some of the operations that it takes to manufacture these heads. After the heads have been received from the foundry, they're installed into this computer-controlled machine. Now this American-made machine is capable of machining 5 separate surfaces in one programming. You're watching it mill out the O-ring groove in the top of the head. Now this machine is capable of changing its own tools automatically. As you see from this side view. It will also automatically index to the next machining position. Now once this machine is finished milling the surfaces and all the quality assurance inspections have been completed, it will then go to the valve seat cutting operation. You're looking at a stack of polished rocker boxes ready for assembly. And in the background is yet another computer-controlled machine. Now this machine is drilling the oil holes in the rocker arms themselves. And incidentally, these rocker arms have a tensile strength much stronger than the stock rocker arms. This is one of the test bikes that has just undergone thousands and thousands of test miles. Notice the patented Feuling anti-reversion exhaust system. This exhaust system greatly increases the horsepower generated by these 4-valve heads. And speaking of horsepower, take a look at the bench flow test that these heads have undergone. In designing these 4-valve heads, Feuling used the latest that the computer-aided design and computer-aided manufacturing world has to offer. In fact, he used the 486 computer system, which allows unlimited versatility in design. Now here you see the rocker arms, push rods, and valve stems. In a moment you'll get a look at the valve heads and valve seats. It's easy to see that these heads are not copies. These are American-made heads designed by Americans for the American-made motorcycle. And now let's take a look at what the Stage 1 kit has to offer. Now we're going to show you an array of parts and assemblies along with some accessory pipes and mufflers that are available from Rivera Engineering. The heads and the rocker boxes come assembled. After you remove the stock heads from your motorcycle, bolt the cylinders down, taking care that you do not disturb the base gasket. Then you need to install a dial indicator on the front cylinder, put the engine in gear, and rock the rear wheel back and forth until you've found top dead center. Then back the engine up 248 thousandths. Now once you've done this, you'll need to mark new timing marks on the flywheel. Now if you use a center punch, tap very lightly. Only a light mark is all that's needed. And we suggest that you use 3 light punch marks as your new timing mark. Now if you have a stock ignition, or you do not require your motorcycle to rev higher than 5200 RPM, you won't need to disassemble your hydraulic followers. However, if you do require the motorcycle to rev higher than 5200 RPM, you'll need to install rings in the hydraulic followers, as you see here, which will cause these followers to be semi-solid. Now again, you'll only need to do this if the motorcycle is going to be running higher than 5200 RPM. Now once you've installed this ring, simply reassemble the hydraulic unit. If you're using a vise to hold the lifter in place while you're assembling it, take care that you do not over-torque or over-tighten the vise on this lifter. Now obviously these rings, if you're going to use them, needs to be installed in all 4 hydraulic lifter units. And now the lifter units can be reinstalled into the lifter blocks, and the lifter blocks then inserted into the engine. Now we're using a pair of needle nose vice grips to hold the lifters into place. If you do this, make sure that you use very little pressure. Now on the bottom side of this block there is a little flange that will need to be aligned in order for it to drop into place. Now once you've squared up the block to the engine, go ahead and put the bolts in and then just torque them down. And incidentally, you can find the torque settings for these bolts and others in your shop manual. Now your kit comes supplied with new head gaskets and dowel pin O-rings. In fact, we supply Millmeyer Pro Street gaskets, which are the best available. Go ahead and put these gaskets and O-rings into place, starting with the rear cylinder. Now the rear cylinder should be at top dead center, compression stroke. The heads come with 2 of the head bolts already in place. Brush on some anti-seize compound, and that should go onto the threads of the head bolts. You should also apply a drop of oil underneath the head of the head bolts. This will ensure a correct and true torque reading. Again, once the anti-seize has been applied to all 4 bolts and a drop of oil under the head of each bolt, go ahead and torque the head down. The torque sequence and the torque readings required can be found in your shop manual. Once the rear head has been torqued into place, simply repeat the procedure for the front head. Now remember to put the gaskets into place and the O-rings into place first. As you can see, a dab of anti-seize is being applied to all 4 head bolts, and a drop of motor oil is being applied to each of the head bolts just beneath the head itself. When putting the head into place, don't forget that there are 2 dowel pins that need to be aligned up. And once that is done, simply run the bolts down just as you did with the rear head. Now, as the manual indicates, he's beginning with a low torque reading, and he will torque each of the bolts down according to the specifications and the torque sequence in the manual. These swivel foot adjusters can now be installed into the rocker arms. Simply thread them in, and the locking nut or jam nut needs to be installed on the opposite side. Now, using a vernier caliper, you will need to adjust the adjuster on the right side of the engine to 100 thousandths clearance. Now, this clearance setting is for cams which have 500 thousandths lift or less. Once you have it adjusted, tighten down the locking nut. And after you've done that, it's always a good idea to double check to make sure that your adjustment setting hasn't changed. Now, the adjusters on the left side of the motorcycle will be adjusted later. That's both intake and exhaust. Now install the O-rings that fit into the top of the cylinder heads. There will be a small O-ring that will fit around the spark plug hole and a larger one which will fit around the outside perimeter. You simply use your fingers to press these O-rings into place. Take your time and make sure that the O-ring has not been twisted. Now, when these O-rings are installed correctly, they provide an absolutely oil-tight seal. Now the O-rings need to be installed on the ends of the pushrod tubes. There will be one O-ring which will fit where the telescopic tubes fit together, one on the top of the tube, and the bottom O-ring can be pushed into the lifter block itself. There are 3 different sizes of Allen bolts provided to install the rocker boxes. Now, the middle size will need to be put into the rocker boxes on the rear head before the rocker box is slid into position. Also, there is a stainless bolt provided which will be exposed after the rocker box cover has been installed. Now, a dab of anti-seize should be applied to the threads of all of these bolts. Again, using the middle size bolts, put them into the center holes. And then slide the rocker box assembly into place. Now, these center bolts should only be turned in by using your fingers, and they should be turned in 2 or 3 turns and no more. The reason is that you need to be able to move this rocker box up and down in order to get the push rods in place. A dab of anti-seize compound needs to be put onto the end of each of the push rods. Now the push rods will come numbered 1 through 4. Number 1 push rod is for the very first valve or front valve of the front cylinder. In other words, number 1 would be for the exhaust valve of the front cylinder. Number 2 would be for the intake valve of the front cylinder. And as you see here, he's installing number 3, which is the intake valve of the rear cylinder. And finally, number 4 would be for the exhaust valve of the rear cylinder. Now it's very important that these push rods are not mixed up or that they are installed by interchanging them. They must be numbered 1 through 4, beginning at the front of the engine, working to the rear. The end of the adjuster has a flat ground into the swivel ball. Now this flat must be located in a position so that when it's installed onto the motorcycle, the flat will come into contact with the end of the valve. This is very important. Now the O-rings have already been put into place on the front cylinder, and now the rocker box needs to be put into position. Top dead center will need to be located on the front cylinder, and you do this by putting something into the spark plug hole, and with the engine in gear, rock the rear tire back and forth until you found top dead center. And that of course should be on the compression stroke. And incidentally, whatever you use to find top dead center, it should be something that is not too small or of a shape that should you drop it, it would fall into the engine. Now once this has been done, inspect again to make sure that the flats of the swivel foot adjuster is in fact down. Do not oil these adjusters until they are bolted into place. We've found that when you put oil on these adjusters, the flat is no longer visible. The drop of oil will run down onto the foot and you won't be able to tell if the flat is down or not. The Allen bolts can now be installed. Again, the mid-sized ones will go in the middle, the long ones toward the right side of the motorcycle, and the short ones on the left. The next bolt after this one will be the stainless bolt. It's the one just at this side of the spark plug hole. Now once they're all hand tightened down, you can go ahead and torque them all down evenly. The final torque should be 20 foot-pounds. The valves can now be adjusted, and for stage 1 kits with hydraulic lifters, you should go ahead and adjust them according to the written instructions. For this installation, since we are using semi-solid lifters, they should be adjusted at 0 lash. That is, by turning the adjusters so that there is no up and down movement, yet the push rods can be turned by using your fingers. Now when tightening down the locking nut, the torque should be approximately the same as the torque you would use when adjusting adjustable push rods. Just take your time and do each valve individually. While he's making these final adjustments, I'd like to emphasize that if you have a Stage 1 kit with hydraulic lifters, you do not need to modify the lifters to make them semi-solid. That is only a requirement if you are going to use a Stage 2 or you're going to have an engine that's going to rev higher than 5,200 RPM. Adjusting these valves is actually very easy to do. And we recommend once again that once you have all the valves adjusted that you recheck the jam nuts or the locking nuts and make sure that they are secure. Now with a small flashlight with the lights dimmed, look again at all 4 valve adjusters and make sure that the little foot is down. In other words, the flat part of that foot is in contact with the valve stem. And once you've done this and made certain that they're all four flats are against the valves, now you can go ahead and oil the valve springs and the adjuster foot. A few squirts on each one will be sufficient. Apply a coat of gasket sealer on one side of the rocker box cover gasket. Now this gasket is identical from side to side, so just pick one of the sides and put a nice even coat on the gasket. Once you've done this, set the gasket aside and then apply an even coat on the rocker box cover. Now the center hole needs a little dab of gasket sealer right there. Now after these 2 parts have had a chance to get tacky, go ahead and put the gasket onto the rocker box cover. Make sure you line up all the edges and then just press it onto the cover. Now there's no need to apply a coat of sealer on this other surface. You'll want to remove that cover from time to time, and if you glue both sides it'll be very difficult to get off, and it actually is very unnecessary to do that. The cover is now ready to be slid into place. The bolts that are supplied for the kit come with two washers. There will be a steel washer and a sealing washer. Now the steel washer will go onto the bolt first, and the sealing washer will go against the cover. Incidentally, all of the bolts supplied for the rocker box covers are stainless steel. Now, in order to install the rear rocker box cover, the intake valves must be all the way open. In other words, the rocker arm must be all the way down. This will provide enough clearance to slide the rocker box cover into place. The pushrod tubes can now be slid into place and the keepers installed. The exhaust header pipes are next, and we are using the patented Feuling Engineering anti-reversion pipes. These pipes really add a lot of extra torque and horsepower to the 4-valve heads. Now install O-rings into the intake manifolds using the same method that you used when installing the O-rings on the cylinder heads. Just simply press them into place with your fingers, making sure that they're not twisted. There are two O-rings on the back side. Make sure that you install both of them in the grooves provided. You need to apply a coat of O-ring lubricant onto these O-rings. This will help provide a sealing barrier and also allow this manifold to slip easily into the head. A nice light film will do. You do not need to put an excessive amount. Now with the flat of your hand, simply work this intake manifold back and forth. Take your time. Do not exert a great deal of pressure, and just simply work it into place. Now if the O-ring pops out as it did in this case, simply press it back into place. And once again, you need to put a coat of O-ring lubricant on this O-ring. And we've already performed this procedure on the rear cylinder, as you can see. The intake plenum has a raised boss area, and this is so that if you are using a stock ignition which requires a VOES connection, you can drill this area out to fit the size fitting that comes with your particular type of ignition. The plenum to intake manifold is a very precise fit, so you'll need to take your time when you insert this piece. Now, if you have difficulty in inserting it, double check and make sure that the intake manifolds are pressed into the heads firmly. Now, once it gets started and you start sliding it into place, double check and make sure that the O-rings have not popped out, and then simply slide the piece in. You can use your finger to reach inside on the near side to check and make sure that the O-rings are in place, and don't forget to go around to the other side and check the back side as well. There are 2 large retaining rings and an insertion tool supplied with the kit. Take the insertion tool and insert it into one of the rings and spread the rings so that it will fit over the intake flange. Now, once it's fitted over the intake flange, it now must be spread wide enough to fit over the intake manifold ears. Now, if it doesn't easily fit over these ears, simply adjust the tool so that it spreads the retaining ring wide enough to slide over these ears. And now you simply back the nut off and remove the tool. These same procedures are used to install the retaining ring on the other side. Next, the carburetor is installed. And you should refer to your tuning instructions for proper jetting. Incidentally, we are installing a stock carburetor. Now, obviously, if you have an accessory carburetor, the type of brackets that are used on the carburetor itself and the cables may differ. Whatever type of cabling or carburetor you have, you should now check and make sure that the free play is adjusted correctly and that the throttle closes all the way. Now, depending upon the type of gasoline tank that you have and the carburetor that you have, you may need to put a longer fuel line on the bike. Now, we put a drop of oil in the end of the new fuel line so that it'll slip over the fitting easy. And now it's a simple matter of assembling the air cleaner backing plate. And once again, in this case, it's a stock air cleaner. Incidentally, some mechanics like to use a drop of Loctite on these inside screws. That would prevent them from accidentally coming out and possibly getting sucked into the carburetor. The heads come with cast-in bosses which have been threaded to accept the stock carburetor mounting bolts. Now, if you have an accessory carburetor, this might be the attachment point that you will want to use. Fit the air cleaner element and the air cleaner cover. Now is the time to go ahead and install your exhaust pipes. And incidentally, we highly recommend that you investigate the exhaust pipes that are offered by Rivera. These pipes are specially designed for the higher output of the 4-valve heads. There are 2 different types that are available now, and there will probably be other types in the future, but these pipes are definitely far superior in performance than the stock pipes. Now the coil bracket can be installed. Now this bracket that comes with the kit has a slot in it for the stock choke cable. Also, the hold down bolts go through the 2 heads. The heads have inserts, steel inserts in them for strength. Now once you've got the choke cable finger tight and the bolts that go through the heads screwed into place where it locates the plate, the bracket, now you can go ahead and put the bolt through the stabilizer. Now while he's putting these bolts in, this stabilizer will probably need to be adjusted on your model. Simply adjust the stabilizer in or out so that the bolt easily slips through the bracket and the stabilizer. Now make sure that once you've adjusted the stabilizer that the locking nuts are secured tight. And now it's a simple matter of going ahead and torquing down all the bolts that complete this bracket installation. This bracket comes to you powder coated. And now the coil can be installed, but you must use the special spark plug wires that are included with the kit. Now these spark plug wires are high performance MSD brand spark plug wires. Now these wires come cut to length, and they have the type of boot that is needed to fit the centrally located spark plug. To install the spark plugs, use a spark plug insertion tool or a piece of neoprene tubing. Simply press the tubing over the end of the spark plug, as you see here, and install the spark plug. Now you'll want to put anti-seize on the threads. Now make sure when you put the anti-seize compound on the threads of the spark plug that you do not contaminate the electrode. Now you can use the air cooling port which has been cast into the head to help get the plug started if you need to. Once the plug has been screwed into the head as far as it will go by hand, then simply torque the plug down as you normally would. The spark plug boot needs to be lubricated with a dielectric grease. And this is so that the plug boot will go down fully over the spark plug itself. And then you can take some needle nose pliers and simply push the boot over the plug, and it will snap into place. Just as you saw with the rear cylinder, the same procedure should be repeated for the front cylinder. You will find that installing the plugs actually is very easy. A small dab of this dielectric grease is all that's necessary. Incidentally, when installing the spark plug wires or removing them from the plug, don't pull on the wire itself. Always push it on and pull it off by using the boot. Now, if you've had to put on a longer fuel line, now's the time to cut it to length. Make sure you allow a little bit extra so that it has freedom of movement. And now once you've done this, it's a simple matter of clamping it into place. Now while he's doing this, I'd like to mention that when you've installed your gas tank, take a close look that the rear of the tank clears the rear cylinder. You will probably need to raise the rear tank, and you can do that by simply adding a couple of washers underneath the rear hold-down flange. That should raise the tank enough to where it will clear the rear cylinder. Bikes with stock ignitions will have to have the timing reset. Now the timing should be set at 25 degrees total advance. And now after you set this, you need to check with the strobe light that the new timing marks appear in the center of the timing hole window. If not, this needs to be adjusted until it is.
Hi, my name is Mel Magnet, President of Rivera Engineering. Many of you who are viewing this videotape are familiar with my company and the products we manufacture and distribute through our network of dealers and distributors. Our motto has been quality and performance for 17 years, and we are very proud of our reputation in the Harley-Davidson aftermarket. I feel fortunate to have been involved with Jim Feuling in the development of the Feuling Rivera 4-valve heads for Evolution engines. Rivera Engineering is a distribution entity for the 4-valve heads and the patented anti-reversion exhaust system. This videotape explores the total involvement of Feuling Engineering from the initial CAD blueprints to total machining, assembly, and exhaust system manufacturing in-house. Jim Feuling and his capable staff have used the most advanced automotive technology and crossed it over to the Evolution engine. That results a world-class set of 4-valve heads that boast a 26% increase in valve area. Horsepower is increased from approximately 60 to 95 plus, with stock carburetor, stock ignition, and a stock 49-state cam. An option is a newly designed Stage 1 cam that will be available from Rivera Engineering. If you have a set of 4-valve heads on order, I congratulate you on your perception. You own the most advanced heads available. I want to thank you for taking the time to view this videotape. Included in the 4-valve head package is a comprehensive inclusive installation and tuning guide with carburetor jetting recommendations. The 4-valve heads are completely assembled when shipped. All hardware is included. It's a total package. I suggest a qualified mechanic perform the installation. If you purchase an exhaust system, it will bolt on with all the necessary hardware included. The first 100 sets are pre-sold. If you wish to order a set for a 1991 delivery, or if you require a fact-fill brochure, please call Rivera Engineering at 1-800-872-1515. We will be very happy to be of assistance now and in the future. I would like to introduce Mr. Jim Feuling, President of Feuling Engineering. Jim's first love was motorcycles. He built and rode his own bike to the California State TT Championship in 1961. Jim's factory-backed development work on the old Quad 4 helped Oldsmobile set the flying mile record of 267 miles an hour in 1987. Jim is most famous for his Quad 4 experience, which evolved into the Feuling and Rivera 4-valve Evolution heads. He's an inventor, he's a genius, and my friend, Jim Feuling.
Thanks, Mel. This has been a real fun project, and we're very proud of 4-valve head program. This particular cylinder head utilizes the latest technology that we've developed here at Feuling Engineering and initially applied to the Oldsmobile Aerotech high-speed record project. The 4-valve head has a very compact combustion chamber with a centrally located spark plug. This allows for extremely efficient combustion, requiring only 25 degrees total ignition advance. The intake port is the subject of several patents and patents pending. It features a fairing that streamlines the intake valve stem and guide. The short side, the most critical part of the intake port, is defined by a short side radius description. It's a fourth order polynomial equation, which in layman's terms means a short side that is a decreasing radius energy curve. This provides for a significant improvement in port flow by up to 25% over the best cylinder heads that we flow tested here at Feuling Engineering. Airflow relates directly to horsepower. If we see 25% increase in airflow, we would anticipate a 25% increase in power. The exhaust port on the cylinder head is also the subject of a lot of advance. This particular port utilizes a very high-speed, high-velocity concept. The gas speed in the port at optimum RPM is approximately 450 feet per second, mean gas speed. This high exhaust gas speed provides for much better throttle response, fuel efficiency, horsepower, and also reduces the heat transfer to the cylinder head to a bare minimum. The rocker arm we have here is made out of 8620. It's investment cast. We call it the Darth Vader rocker arm. It's extremely stiff and utilizes a swivel foot for contact to the valve stem. The intake manifold that you see here is a stub manifold which utilizes O-rings for the seal to the cylinder head and also to the plenum chamber that sits between the two cylinders. The plenum chamber is also the subject of a patent pending. It's available in dual carbureted configuration in stage 2 and a single carb model for stage 1. The dual carbureted configuration as a bolt-on to the stage 1 is worth 12 to 15 horsepower. Throttle response is instantaneous and horsepower is awesome. We also have applied anti-reversionary technology to the head kit. It's available as an exhaust system package with a zero-loss muffler. The muffler, as a bolt-on, provides for street-legal sound, and there is no visible horsepower loss on the dynamometer or on the street. As I said, this has been a real fun project, and I'd like to thank Mel Magnet and Rivera Engineering for their support. We couldn't have done it without them, and I'd like to thank you very much for your interest in the 4-valve head.